So it's a new topic, discourse and pragmatics. What is pragmatics? Pragmatics is the study of meaning in relation to the context in which a person is speaking or writing. So pragmatics is the study of contextual meaning of language. So what do we mean by the context? So the context can mean social, situational, and textual. Okay, so it can mean the situational context, or the social context, or the context created by the text. It also includes background knowledge, context, that is what people know about each other and about the world. So when we take part in a conversation, we generally have some background. We come with some background knowledge. Background knowledge of the about the people, background knowledge about events that had happened before. Right, background knowledge about who is involved, what their roles are, and so on. So what we mean by the context is then all these. How the context contributes to meaning is what we mainly study in pragmatics. So it is not very difficult to understand that the context plays a main role in the interpretation of language. That is something that we always take for granted. We have never been trained on this. Nobody has taught us how to do this, but everyone is aware of how to make use of the contextual clues, so the context, in order to interpret language. So how is context playing a role in the interpretation of language? So that is what we basically look at in pragmatics. So let me share a short video clip. Probably I have shown this to you when I was doing, probably I showed this to you when I was doing semantics. Let me see whether I can find this. Okay.
Trying to get to the airport to my flight. There was this lady who had a sombrero on her back, and she kept going up to every.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. So she kept going up to every flight attendant.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, I hate warnings.
Hello.
Oh, really? I mixed them up.
So today I was walking to class and I saw this tailless squirrel. It was pretty funny. Hello, are you listening to me?
Did it attack you?
Hello, are you gonna get that?
Hello? Hello? Oh, hey.
No, yeah, I'll go get her. All right, just a second.
Mom! Telephone!
Chloe, on the porch, is that a squirrel without a tail?
Oh my god. Hello? Hello.
Where are my glasses? Where the F are they? You know I can't text without them.
Hello?
Oh, piss. I do that all the time.
Hello? Seat saver.
Okay.
I'll put this.
Hello?
What?
Hello? Hello.
Okay, so in this one, you saw an example of how the context can determine the meaning of a word. Now, hello is a word that we commonly use. And it can be interpreted in various ways, and it can play various roles in various contexts. And how we interpret hello depends on the context in which it is used, and that is called the pragmatic context. So pragmatics is interested in the context, how the context plays a role in the determination or in the interpretation of meaning. One of the theories that has elaborated on the context, how context contributes to meaning, is the speech act theory. The speech act theory. So we are going to talk about this in the context of discourse, okay? Right, the speech act theory is one theory that illustrates on the role played by the context in the interpretation of language. The speech act theory is a theory in pragmatics, which is relevant to discourse analysis. And it is a theory developed by two prominent linguists in 1960s. And they are known as J.L. Austin and J.R.C. Searle, actually. Okay. Austin and Searle developed the theory of, or this theory, a speech act theory, to illustrate how the pragmatic context plays a major role in the determination or in the interpretation of language. The major claim of the speech act theory is that speech is action. So when we produce a speech, we are involved in action. We are performing action. We don't generally think about speech as action, but speech is action. And language is used to perform things, not only to describe a state of affairs. So we don't use language to describe a state of affairs, but we use language to perform action. We perform action by using language. So how do we perform action using language? And that is what the speech act theory elaborates on. In the same way we perform physical acts or action, we also perform acts by using language. So when we use language, we perform various acts. So what are some of the typical acts or action that we perform by using language? Some of the acts that we actually perform can be the common speech acts that we perform can be listed as requests. So requesting is an action that we perform with language. How many requests do we make within a day when we use language? It's a lot. Warnings, invitations, promises, apologies, predictions, giving orders, inviting, greeting. Okay, these are common acts that we perform. So whenever we use language, and if you paid careful attention to what you do with language, you would naturally see that your use of language every day is characterized by using different speech acts. We try to perform a speech act whenever we use language. And that can be a request, a warning, invitation, promise, apology, prediction, giving order, inviting, and so on. Threatening. Okay? Different speech acts are performed. The speech act theory shows how language is used to do things that go beyond the literal meaning of utterances. Language is used to do things that go beyond the literal meaning of utterances. Now let's take an example to understand what we mean by this. Okay, suppose you are at home and your father is sitting and reading the newspaper, weekend newspaper. And you're passing by. And he says something like this. Suppose he says, ඔය මේසෙ උඩ මගේ කණ්ණාඩි දෙක ඇති. Okay? මේසෙ උඩ මගේ කණ්ණාඩි දෙක ඇති. That's all he says. How would you interpret that as? Right. It's very unnatural if we interpreted that as just passing information, right? So it's not just like if you take the literal meaning of it. So we would say, oh, yeah, it is there. But that's not what he meant. So when you're passing by, so he's trying to read, and probably he has found it difficult to read it, and he's saying, my kannad mage kannadi deka ඇති මේසෙ උඩ. So it's a request. You can make a request in two different ways. You can say, please take those glasses which are on the table, or please bring those glasses which are on the table. But you don't have to say that, right? Always. If we simply say, mage glasses mage kannadi deka ඇති මේසෙ උඩ කිව්වම we know it is a request. We interpret it as a request. So speech act theory shows how language is used to do things that go beyond the literal meaning of utterances. This is context dependent, right? This is context dependent. We interpret the speech act immediately, and we have that ability. Using the context, we make use of the context and we interpret the intended speech act. So the speech act theory shows how we go beyond the literal meaning. The literal meaning is just a sentence, a statement, which says, my glasses are lying on the table. But the intended speech act is something different. And think about how many speech acts that you actually perform like this in your day-to-day life. There are many, so many. It is our ability to perform speech acts that makes language useful to humans. If we cannot perform speech acts with language, is language going to be a meaningful, a useful tool for us? Not really. Language is a useful tool because we can perform a variety of speech acts using this language. We can request, we can order, we can apologize, we can promise, we can predict, we can invite, we can greet, we can give orders, we can threaten. So there are many things that we can do with language. So language in that sense is action. So we perform speech acts whenever we use language. So the speech act theory shows how language is used to perform a variety of speech acts. Some most common speech acts are assertion or assertion. So assertion is basically conveying information. Okay, so if you make an assertion, so that means you are conveying some information. For example, so there is a holiday this week. Or there is a snake in the backyard. Question, eliciting information. Request, elicits action or information. Ordering, promising, threatening. Okay, so these are different speech acts, and each speech act is associated with a function. Okay, right, so you can take down anything from here if you want. Right. A speech act becomes felicitous only when it is uttered in a specific context. Now we perform speech acts in day-to-day life. In a given day, on a given day, we perform hundreds and hundreds of speech acts. So a speech act becomes felicitous, so appropriate, only when it is uttered in a specific context. For any speech act to be felicitous, there is a set of conditions that must be met. Okay, a speech act, when we perform a speech act, we are subconsciously or unconsciously aware of the felicity conditions as well. Okay, we would perform a speech act only when it is felicitous or when only all the felicity conditions have been met. And this is what the speech act theory shows. Okay, we perform a speech act only when certain felicity conditions are met. If the felicity conditions are not met, we don't perform a speech act. So what do we mean by felicity condition? So what are different felicity conditions associated with the speech acts? And that's what we are going to talk about now. Right, so I will start off with this one. Felicity conditions can be considered conventions that speakers and addressees use as a code to produce and recognize actions, right? So felicity conditions can be considered conventions that speakers and addressees use as a code to produce and recognize actions. So we use felicity conditions as a code. So let's explore a little bit more about these felicity conditions. Felicity conditions can be divided into three categories. There are three categories of felicity conditions we generally consider or take into consideration in performing a speech act. One is called essential condition. Okay, one is called the essential condition. We perform a speech act only when the essential condition is met. And then the second category of felicity conditions is called the sincerity condition. So there are certain things which are associated with the sincerity condition. And the third is preparatory conditions. So the first one is essential condition, second is sincerity condition, and the third is the preparatory conditions. So when all these conditions are met, we would perform a speech act. So if a speech act, so when we would only perform a speech act when these conditions are met. Otherwise, we don't perform these speech acts. So what do we mean by the essential condition? Both speaker and hearer take the utterance to be performative. So that means I intend to perform. Suppose I'm making a request from someone. Both the speaker and the hearer take the utterance to be performative, means I intend to perform an act of request, and my hearer understands it as an act of request. So there is, so the speaker and the hearer take the utterance to be performative, understand the intention of the act. Okay. Suppose a student to a teacher says, I promise to do my homework. I promise to do my homework. So the student is performing a speech act here. Obviously, the student is performing it by using, right? So the speech intended, a speech act is indicated by the verb. I promise to do my homework. So always this, it is not very clear like this, right? Because we always don't say, I request you to bring my glasses. Okay. So we would say, can you take my glasses? I can't read without glasses. I wonder where my glasses are. So you can perform the same speech act in different ways, diverse ways. So one way in which we can perform the speech act is by directly using the verb, or directly using the verb that refers to the speech act. So I can say, I promise, I request. But that is not the only way in which we can perform a speech act. So here the student says, I promise to do my homework. So let's see how this can meet the essential condition. Both the teacher and the student think of that statement as taking the form of a promise. The essential condition is met only if only if the student intends to perform the act of promising, and if the teacher understands it as an act of promising as well. So there is a kind of a mutual understanding of the role of the speech act. Then only the essential condition is met. The teacher understands it as a promise and the student understands it as a promise. Okay, or the student intends to perform the act of promising. The speaker means what he or sincerity condition. The speaker means what he or she says. So this is concerned with the sincerity, whether the speaker is genuine in what he or she says. Both speaker and hearer take the utterance to be intentional, to accurately represent the wish of the speaker and the hearer's understanding that the utterance expresses that wish. Okay, sincerity condition is met only if the speaker actually intends to perform that speech act, if the speaker means what he or she says. So a speech act becomes felicitous, so appropriate, only when it meets the essential condition. Second, the sincerity condition. Okay, and there's a third one as well, and we are going to talk about the third one next. Okay, sincerity condition is whether the speaker is genuine, sincere, or serious about what he or she says. Okay, take down this as well. Right. And next one is the preparatory condition. Okay, preparatory condition. This is the third condition that has to be met or fulfilled in order for a speech act to be felicitous. This means that the speaker can do what he or she says. Both the speaker and the hearer agree that it is situationally appropriate for the speaker to perform the speech act. The speaker has power of authority over the hearer. Okay, and when these are met, we would generally say that the preparatory condition is met. Okay, the speaker can do what he or she says, or the speaker and the hearer agree that it is situationally appropriate for the speaker to perform the speech act. So a speech act becomes felicitous only when preparatory conditions are also met. Now let's say something like let's take an example here. Now, when you go around, suppose like, okay, you are traveling, you are driving, and then you are stopped by a policeman. And then the policeman says, please show me your driving license. Is it a felicitous speech act? And you are driving around, you are stopped by someone, some lay persons. And the person says, show me your driving license. Okay, suppose like, okay, to be more specific, suppose you go to Cinec and you park your car there. And then you get down, and then even a security personnel comes and says, show me your driving license. Would you show it? Is it a felicitous speech act? So there the security person doesn't have the authority to check the driving license of someone, right? So in that context, it is infelicitous. So preparatory, so what is, so when we try to perform a speech act in a context like that, what happens is it violates one of the felicity conditions. Okay, it becomes inappropriate, right? The speaker and the hearer agree that it is situationally appropriate for the speaker to perform the speech act. But in this context, hearer doesn't, at least the hearer doesn't agree that it is situationally appropriate for the speaker to perform the speech act, because the speaker doesn't have the power of authority over the hearer. Right. So we are going to analyze some speech acts using these. So these are some of the codes that we will be using in our analysis. S means the speaker. H means the hearer. So we'll be using this for our convenience. P means some state of affairs, and A means some action. Okay. So S refers to, in our descriptions, S stands for speaker, H stands for the hearer, P stands for some state of affairs, and A stands for some action. Felicity conditions for questions. If you ask a question, when you perform the act of questioning, okay, if you perform the act of questioning, and this is how the felicity conditions, how it can become felicitous. In order for a question to be felicitous, these conditions should be met. Number one, a speaker does not know some information about P, about some state of affairs. So we would only ask a question when we don't know some information about you. Okay, about someone, some state of affairs. S wants to know that information about P. And this, the speaker wants to know that information about the state of affairs. And then the sincerity condition is met. If the speaker does not know some information about P, and then the preparatory condition is met. S believes that H may be able to supply the information about P that she wants. Oh, sorry, that S wants. And once again, the preparatory condition is met here. S believes that H may be able to supply the information about the state of affairs that the speaker wants to know. Right? So when these conditions are met, the question becomes felicitous. Now, let's take a few examples here. Now, suppose you attend this lecture. Soon after the lecture, one of your friends or one of the classmates who was absent today in this lecture calls you. One of your classmates calls you or gives you a call. And the person asks a question. So what was done in today's discourse analysis lecture? The person asks. Is it a felicitous question or infelicitous question? Right. We would all agree that the question that your friend asks is felicitous. Why would you say it is felicitous? Because it meets all the felicity conditions here. Okay? S does not know some information about P. So your friend was absent in the lecture. So he or she does not know what happened in the class on that day. So that condition is fulfilled or it is not violated. S wants to know that information about P or the state of affairs. The state of affairs here means what happened in class. So your friend wants to know what happened or wants to know what happened or some information about what happened in that class on that particular day. S believes that H may be able to supply the information about P that S wants. So your friend believes that you will be able to, H here means the hearer, or you will be able to supply that information or tell him or her what happened in class. So that question is felicitous. The question asked by your friend is felicitous because it does not violate any of the felicity conditions. Now let's take a different example. Let's make this situation slightly different. Now suppose there was a friend of yours who attended the lecture on that particular day. And you could see the person's name among participants. Okay. And then after the lecture, you get a call from your friend who attended the lecture, whose name you saw among participants. And your friend asks, can you tell me what happened in the lecture today? Well, what would you naturally ask your friend? Think about it. Would you simply say, okay, this is what happened. We learned about the speech act theory today. No. You would naturally ask, why were you not there? I saw your name. So why are you asking that question? Without providing him or her with the answer straight away. Well, The reason is that you think at least one of the felicity conditions has been violated for asking a question in that context. And you think that, so if somebody attended the lecture, probably the person already has that information about the state of affairs, so about what happened in the lecture. And you think, or you doubt that a felicity condition has been violated or not. And then your friend would say, well, yes, I was there, but I could not, I missed that part of the, I didn't hear something, or there was a technical problem, or I had to leave. And then there is no any felicity condition violated. So any of these conditions is not violated. And then you would naturally say, okay, this is what happened. So in order for a question to be felicitous, these conditions have to be fulfilled. The speaker does not know some information about P. So when your friend asks that question, if the friend already knows the kind of information that he or she is looking for, then there is a violation of the felicity condition. And there's, or your friend wants to know that information about what happened in class. That's sincerity. And S believes that H may be able to supply the information about P that she wants. That is also preparative. And your friend thinks that you will be able to provide that information. So these have to be met in order for a question to be felicitous. Okay? Otherwise, the question becomes, asking a question becomes infelicitous or inappropriate in a particular context. Request. So in which context would we make a request? What are some of the felicity conditions that should be met? So felicity conditions means context here. So it is the context that these people are actually analyzing in terms of felicity conditions. So what is the context? So what are the felicity conditions that should be met for a request to be made? S believe A has not yet been done. Suppose I ask one of the students in class, okay? Suppose I'm teaching and there's a student who is sitting closer to the door and door is open. And we can hear noise on the corridor. And then we are disturbed. Then I would ask one of the students who is sitting closer to the door, can you close the door, please? Can you close the door, please? And that would only be felicitous if these conditions are met. Number one, S believes A has not yet been done. Okay, a speaker believes some action has not yet been done. So that means the door has not been closed. If I'm asking someone to close the door, when the door is already closed, then I am violating I'm violating the preparatory condition. The speaker wants some action to be done. So there's sincerity. There should be sincerity on one part. S believes that H is able to do A. The speaker, as the speaker, I believe that my hearer is able to do A. Closing the door. So the student is an adult. The student can close the door. And if it were a child, I would not ask the child to close the door because I would get scared. I mean, I would be concerned whether the child would hurt himself or herself by closing the door. So I would certainly take that into consideration, whether the person is able to close the door. And if it is a heavy iron door, and I would not ask you to close it as well. So it has to believe that A is able to do A. S believes that H is willing to do A type things for S. Okay, S speaker believes that the hearer is willing to do A type things means action. A here means action. So that type of things for the speaker. So I interpret in that context, my speakers are the speaker, so H is willing to do that kind of thing. So if I ask you to do this, whether there's willingness, whether H would be willing to do it, that is also assessed by the speaker in this context. S makes an attempt to get H to do A. That means I try to make a request and my hearer understands it as a request. So that is essential condition. So a request becomes felicitous only when these conditions are met. If any of these conditions is not met, and then what happens? It becomes infelicitous. Okay. An example of an infelicitous one. Let's say take a request like this. Suppose like, okay, in the classroom, air conditioner is not working. The air conditioner is not working. And the air conditioner is located very high. Okay, so located very high. And it has been placed closer to the roof or the ceiling. And I can clearly see, and I suppose like I can clearly see that person cannot reach it without a ladder or something. And if in such a context, if I say, can you check whether the switch is on? Or can you switch on the air conditioner? Suppose like it is switched off from the machine. Can you switch on the air conditioner? When I clearly know that the person cannot reach it, and then I'm violating one of the felicity conditions. Okay, I'm violating one of the felicity conditions. Third one, S believes that H is able to do it, right? It is violated. And also 4 can get violated as well. H believes, I may not believe whether the hearer is willing to do those things for S, for the speaker. So when we make a request, we generally make a request only when certain felicity conditions are met. Okay. When does a speaker determine that it is appropriate to ask a question in a particular context or make a request in a particular context? When the felicity conditions associated with the speech act are fulfilled. Whether we make a request or whether we ask a question, the speaker would determine that it is appropriate to ask a question or make a request only when the felicity conditions are met, okay, fulfilled. So what happens when a felicity condition is violated? What happens when a felicity condition is one of the felicity conditions is violated? Felicity conditions for promising. So let's look at promising. So if you make a promise, when would you perform the act of promising? We would perform the act of promising only when these conditions are met. So it's felicity conditions for the speech act of promising. S believes that H wants some action, some A be done, some action, or the speaker believes that the hearer wants some action be done. S is able to do that, A, perform that action. S is willing to do that, A, okay, so the speaker is willing to do that action or perform that action. Action has not been done yet. It has not been done yet. And then speaker makes an attempt to make H believe that, or the hearer believe that the speaker will do some action. Now, suppose you are making this promise. Suppose someone was absent for a class. And when the person comes the following day, you would say, I'll give you a copy of my notes. I'll give you a copy of my notes. That's a promise. So this promise becomes felicitous only these conditions are met. The speaker believes that H wants some action be done. Okay, that is fulfilled. S is able to do that, A. So the speaker should be able to do that. Give a copy of his or her notes. The speaker is willing to do that. Yes, the speaker should be willing to do. That's only it becomes felicitous. A has not been done. So that means the hearer does not have a copy of the notes already. S makes an attempt to make H believe that S will do some A. Okay, essential condition. So there are several conditions that should be met for this speech act to be felicitous. Okay. Right. So write felicity conditions for the following speech act. So just think about the kinds of felicity conditions that should be met for these speech acts to be felicitous. Okay. Ordering, threatening, and assertion. So assertion is kind of making a statement, conveying information. Okay. For example, if you say there's a snake in the backyard, you are making an assertion. There is a holiday next week, that's an assertion. Okay, conveying some information. Okay, think about felicity conditions that should be met for the following speech acts to be felicitous. Spend some time figuring that out. Okay, so what are some of the felicity conditions that should be met for ordering? Ordering here means you order someone to do something. Okay, not ordering food or something. Ordering, S wants H to perform certain A. So that means the speaker wants the hearer to perform certain action, right? Some action. A speaker believes some action needs to be done. So that has to be there. The speaker believes that H is able to do that action. So if I don't believe that my hearer is able to do that, then I won't order the person to do that. H has obligation to do A. The hearer has obligation to do A. So ordering can happen only in a context where the H has the obligation to do that. And then speaker has a right to tell H to do A. Okay. The speaker has right to tell hearer to do or perform that action. Otherwise, it becomes infelicitous. S makes an attempt to get H to do A, so that is essential, right? So that means I'm ordering, and then my hearer understands it as an order. So when these conditions are met, ordering becomes felicitous. So this is a context in which ordering or the act of ordering would become felicitous. So threatening. So threatening happens. Threatening is felicitous, appropriate only in a context. These these felicity conditions are fulfilled. S wants H2 or hearer to perform or not perform some action. S believes that H is unable to do some action. So because we can say, don't do that or do that. H has obligation to do, hearer has obligation to do or not to do A. S makes an attempt to get H to do some A, right? Or is trying to make H avoid something. So threatening is felicitous only when these conditions are met. Okay. Assertion. Assertion is kind of making a remark. Now, as I said earlier, if we say there is a snake in the backyard, so that's an assertion. So when is an assertion appropriate or felicitous? S has evidence for the truth of P. I have reasons, so the speaker has reasons to believe, or the speaker believes that there is a snake in the backyard. So if I say there's a snake in the backyard, so speaker has evidence, reasons for the truth of the P, the state of affairs, so the statement that I'm saying. It is not obvious for both speaker and hearer that H knows P. So if my hearer already knows that there is a snake, so I mean, already knows that there's a snake in the backyard, I won't make the assertion because it's obvious. S believes P, the speaker believes it, and S makes an attempt to assert some P, right? So S makes an attempt to assert some P. So I'm trying to convey some information to my hearer. I'm trying to perform the act of assertion, and my hearer takes it as an act of assertion, and then only the essential condition would be met. And then sincerity condition is I have a sincere need to, I'm genuine and sincere about that, and I want to convey that information. I believe that it is true, and I'm trying to convey that information. And there are some preparatory conditions that should be met. And I should believe that there is a snake in the backyard, and I should have evidence for that. And my hearer should, it should be obvious for the speaker or me that hearer does not know it. If the hearer already knows it, then there is no point in making the assertion. For example, suppose we are in a classroom and we can see outside very clearly, right? And so we both can hear. It is raining outside. We can see that it is raining outside. Then there is no point in my saying it is raining outside, because my hearer already knows that. Then if I make a assertion there, it's raining outside, then it is an inappropriate. Okay, so assertion is felicitous only when these conditions are met. Advising is also associated with felicity conditions. So we perform this speech act only when certain felicity conditions are met. S has some reason to believe A will not benefit, A will benefit. Some action will benefit the hearer. So speaker believes that some action will benefit the hearer. Hearer will not do A in the normal course of events. Now we advise when someone would not do it in the normal course of events. Now you should study hard. We would say that only if the person is not studying hard. If the person is studying hard, we won't say we should study hard, right? So preparatory condition has to be met. S believes A will benefit H. So the speaker believes that this action will benefit H. That is sincerity. And S makes an attempt to get H to do or not to do A. So I'm trying to get the person to, I'm trying to advise. So I'm trying to perform the act of advising. And it is obvious to both the hearer and the speaker. It is that they are involved in the act of performing advising. Okay. So when these felicity conditions are met, advising becomes felicitous or appropriate. Right. So in this session then, we have talked about felicity conditions. So I provided you with an introduction to the speech act theory. So the speech act theory analyzes the speech acts, and it describes the speech as action. When we take part in language, when we produce language, in speech, we perform various speech acts. So those speech acts can be felicitous or infelicitous in a situation, in a context. So we are unconsciously or subconsciously aware of the felicity conditions whenever we perform a speech act. We perform a speech act only when the felicity conditions are fulfilled or met. Okay, felicity conditions associated with a particular speech act are fulfilled. Okay, right. So from here onwards, we will talk about some of the constructs or some of the concepts associated with the speech act theory. And also we will talk about some of the pragmatics associated with conversations. So that we will do next in our next session. Okay. So I will also send you a reading related to this, and then you can also look at that reading to further understand, okay, the concept.